she's a straight shooter, if you know what I mean. Dishing out the truth about the royal scene with a fist of fire and a voice so keen. Hitting hard with those altar bridge vibes, no sugarcoating, no false alibis. Tearing down the lies she despises. Yorkshire lass with fire in her eyes. Stef don't play, she holds the line. Shouting from the rooftops across the digital vine. Harry and Meghan under her sign. Fearless and bold with a soul that shines. See a fake, she's a beacon bright, unraveling the drama without a fright. Armored with honesty, ready to fight. Injustice quivers at a sight. Unbreakable will won't be confined. Mind of steel and heart redefined. Rhetoric sharp, leaving dust behind. In Stef's world, truth is intertwined. Stef don't play, she holds the line. Shouting from the rooftops across the digital vine. Harry and Meghan under her sign. Fearless and bold with a soul that shines. Will won't be confined. Mind of steel and heart redefined. Rhetoric sharp, leaving dust behind. In Stef's world, truth is intertwined. Stef don't play, she holds the line. Shouting from the rooftops across the digital vine. Harry and Meghan under her sign. Fearless and bold with a soul that shines.
Hey up everyone, and welcome to a very special edition and one-off stream for the Daily Nerd Live Tuesday edition. Oh my goodness. Just to kind of make you guys aware, if you didn't see my video from earlier on where I broke the news about Prince Harry's visa application documents being released, but it's not what you expect, then make sure you do check it out, because I do go through all the documents that had been released by that point, which were exhibits 1 to 4. Exhibits 5 to 6 have since been released. Nothing else has been released since then, but it's the same situation. It's all heavily redacted, and we are no further along finding out whether Prince Harry lied on his application or not when it comes to his illicit substance use in the past. But as promised, I am here with your favourite DC lawyer, John Witherspoon, who is going to break this all down for us. Hey up, John, how's it going, mate?
I'm good, Stef. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. Thank you very much for asking. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. So I suppose the first question really is, you've gone through all the documents as I have as well. What is your reaction to these documents being released? It's definitely not what I expected. What say you?
Well, it is kind of what I expected. And the reason is that the last hearing in Washington, when the judge was talking with the lawyer for Homeland Security, a guy named John Bardo, and was talking with Samuel Dewey for the Heritage Foundation, the judge was saying, well, I would like to see all of this stuff. And Mr. Bardo for Homeland Security effectively said, okay, that's fine, we'll do that, but you may get back a shell, and they kept referring to the possibility of getting a shell. And that's pretty much what we got today is some paperwork with, as you said, Steph, tons of redactions, but at the same time, there are a couple of little hints in there that I think are going to be important for Heritage Foundation going forward. So there are a couple of places where Homeland Security has talked about, okay, well, we relied on this exemption and this exemption and this exemption. And those are the places that I think Heritage Foundation is going to try and drill down, and they're going to say, okay, well, this exemption doesn't apply because he went on with Anderson Cooper and he said the following, and he wrote the book Spare and he said the following. And I think that's really the way that they're going to try and kick this up to the appellate court, which will be the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., basically right down the street or just around the corner from where Judge Nichols is in the United States District Court. And that will likely be a 3-judge panel. It'll be 3 judges chosen at random from the from the bank of appellate court judges. And it could be a mix of Republicans and Democrats, or it could be all 3 Democrats. It could be all 3 Republicans. But it'll just be very interesting to see what the next steps are that Heritage is going to rely on.
Okay, so this, in a way, is a win for the Heritage Foundation, because even though we've not got to the bottom as to whether Prince Harry actually lied on his visa application or not, it is a win for the Heritage Foundation because now they know what the Department of Homeland Security are citing in terms of regulations and laws for the Heritage Foundation to then argue back and say, actually, what you're referencing here in terms of, you know, these exemptions doesn't work because of A, B, C, and D. They didn't have the opportunity to do that last time because it was all redacted. They didn't know what exemptions they were referencing. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of portraying it. Basically, there were 2 paths that Heritage could have taken after the last hearing. The first one, which is, I think, not the path that they're so inclined to take at this point, was that the 2 sides are entitled to have an adversarial back and forth. And what Heritage said, and I actually asked Samuel Dewey, Heritage's lawyer, after the last hearing, I said, listen, if you guys appeal, would you appeal based on the fact that you're not able to appeal, which is kind of a convoluted way of thinking about it, but it's like, well, we can't appeal because we don't know what to appeal on. So as a result of that, we're going to appeal and say we can't put forward a fair appeal, if that makes sense. The other option, which I think is the option that they're going to take now, is that they're going to say, well, okay, Homeland Security has told us that they're going to rely on the following arguments about not releasing parts of his file and redacting all of this information. And we're now able to, as I said a moment ago, go to the appellate court and say, okay, well, this exemption that they're relying on does not apply because of something that Harry said in the book, or this exemption does not apply. He's basically eliminated or made that null and void because of something that he said when he went on 60 Minutes or wherever he was with Anderson Cooper. So they have, to me, again, this is kind of a win for Homeland Security because they now know what they can rely on. They have some stakes that they can drive into the ground and say, okay, we're going to rely on these points when we file an appeal up to the Court of Appeals.
Sorry, correction. It's not a win for Homeland Security. It's a win for the Heritage Foundation. So they know they can rely on the points that the Department of Homeland Security made. Right. Okay, fair enough. Sorry, you said it the other way around. I'm like, yeah. It was just to clarify that point.
I would call it a marginal win. Yeah, a marginal win for Heritage Foundation.
Okay. So one thing that kind of got my ears pricked up as I was reading through the little that was actually there, that we could actually read, that was legible, was that they were kind of banging on about this point about we're keeping this secret because, we're protecting Harry against the media harassment. What? There's no media harassment. It's all about
Yeah.
holding him to account. It's all about getting to the truth of the matter. So how can the Department of Homeland Security claim that they're protecting Harry against media harassment? If anything, they really shouldn't care about that. It's not their responsibility to protect anyone from media harassment, right? Are they overextending themselves there, do you think?
Well, I think they are a little bit, because the system is designed to not care about anybody's particular title or their circumstances or whether a newspaper reporter might want to show up at their door. I think the courts generally take a dim view, especially the United States being the United States. We have a history of supposedly treating everybody equally. So I can understand why Homeland Security might have thrown some of those arguments into the mix as a little bit of a sweetener and a little bit of a maybe an incentive to try and sway someone, uh, at the court. But at the same time, I think that Heritage Foundation will probably seize on that, and they'll probably say, well, hey, we don't play by those rules. And I do think it's something that has the potential to reemerge in the appeal.
And so, with that being said, in terms of this media harassment angle, which to be fair, I think is absolutely extraordinary, the DHS is using that as a rationale on top of everything else to keep this document a secret. How can the Heritage Foundation fight against this media harassment angle that the DHS are trying to play here? Because if anything, Prince Harry has subjected himself to the media himself by disclosing his illicit substance use in the past many times. I mean, it's not only in the book, but it's interviews as well. He did that online therapy session that I like to call it with Gabor Maté. There's any media harassment, that's of his own making anyway. So how can the Heritage Foundation fight against this angle that the DHS is trying to make here?
Well, I think they could use the argument that you just made, which I think is a perfectly valid one, which is, hey, to the extent that this guy has some sort of special position, which again, I think is questionable, but to the extent that he might, it's his own fault. He's the one, we wouldn't be here talking about any of this had he not written the book and had he not gone on television and run his mouth so much about everything that he's done. It's hard to have sympathy for someone who has done that and has not had the foresight to think about what the consequences might be. Um, that's his own problem, and that is not the problem of Heritage Foundation to try and fight against. It's his own fault, really, and I think that's exactly what we'll see in terms of the argument that is going to be forthcoming, I think, from Heritage.
Yeah, because essentially, how can, this whole thing be treated as private when Prince Harry, off his own back, made his illicit substance use in the past public in the first place? Again, if there's any media harassment, then that's of his own making. But to be fair, I've not really seen any media harassment. I've just seen all of us lot on YouTube and mainstream media essentially just reporting on what's been going on. Yeah, as a YouTuber, we've been, we give our own opinion, conspiracy theories, whatever's. But largely, we're just reporting on what's going on. So for them to try and claim that this is media harassment seems like there's some kind of political spin going on here. Have you seen throughout this whole saga that there has been an element of political spin, or do you think this is the first instance potentially of that?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think one of the things as a lawyer, one of the things that you try to do is to not only talk about the law, but also, try and slip in a few little things here and there around the edge. All lawyers do that all the time. I mean, they try to make their clients sympathetic and try to make sure that they stand the best chance of winning. I mean, anybody can just sort of stand up there and spew out what the United States Code and the United States Code of Federation, Code of the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations talks about, and that's not likely to be very interesting or very persuasive to a judge or to an appellate panel of judges. But at the same time, you can't take that too far, because all of a sudden then the judge will say, well, wait a minute, this is not what I'm really interested in. This is all just sort of superfluous fluff around the edges that doesn't really move the ball for me. So I can understand why they're talking about those types of things. And as far as the political angle, what has been explained to me is that the people who are making these original determinations are sort of the garden variety worker bee people at Homeland Security and at the State Department, who are looking at this question and they're saying, okay, well, based on the way that we do this 7 days, 5 days a week, here's the way that we're going to handle this. And then that gets sent up the chain, and the people at the top of the chain, who are the people whose signatures appear on some of these documents, they basically sign off on it and send it along for the Homeland Security legal team, and John Bardo in particular, to present to the court. But that does not necessarily mean that something at the top couldn't change. And what I've argued is that I suspect when President Trump came out and he said, I'm not going to deport Harry, and he made his famous comment about he's got too many ongoing problems of his own right now with his very unlikable wife. I'm going to let the process unfold on its own. Well, I think my personal suspicion, my theory about what's going on is that he probably would love to see Harry deported, but he's not going to have his fingerprints on it. He is working on ways to have something happen behind the scenes that is going to result in Harry being treated in the way that I think Donald Trump would like to see him treated. But again, his fingerprints are not going to be on it.
Yeah, so a little bit later on in this live stream, I do have a question surrounding, President Trump, but also as well the Bidens. Before we get to that, though, because that is a topic of its own in a sense, going back to these documents that have been released, do they indicate that Prince Harry actually got special treatment? Because at the end of the day, they're firstly referencing media harassment. Like, they're really, it seems like, overstepping the bounds there. They're referencing all these exceptions and exemptions. It feels like to me, and maybe I'm getting the wrong end of stick here, but instinctively it feels like they wouldn't go so far to claim media harassment and list all these exemptions if it was anyone else. Do you see where I'm coming from? So do these documents to you indicate that Prince Harry got special treatment? Or do you think, like you said before, it's just these garden variety people that are just treating this as they would do any other kind of case? They're just not recognising that this case is a little bit of a unicorn. It's different because of the circumstances. What do you think to that?
Well, there's special treatment, and then there is special treatment. I have gotten special treatment in the past when I have needed a passport on an emergency basis. And you can go to your United States senator or your United States representative, and they will, push the buttons and write a little email for you and send it to the State Department and say, if John Witherspoon shows up there tomorrow, he needs a passport by Friday. Please make this happen for him. And you go to a special office and you go through all these different motions, and so you can have special treatment in that way. And by the way, that's available to anybody. Can go to the United States senator or their U.S. representative and ask for that, and they're usually thrilled to help, because that's, I remember exactly who made that happen for me, and I was very grateful, and I've supported that person ever since politically. But at the same time, then there's special treatment in terms of somebody like Prince Harry or some similarly situated celebrity. And for instance, one of the things that has come out in these documents, I believe there's one person who says, well, look, we know that he's been in and out of the country because he has been in the news going in and out of the country, up to Invictus or something like that. And he's, obviously been elsewhere as well. So it's not quite the level of privacy that, for instance, I would get if somebody wrote in and said, has John been out of the United States? And if so, when and where did he go? Well, they would come back and say, just pound sand. That's none of your business. And there's no publicly available information that's appeared on YouTube or CNN or wherever it is showing that John went out of the country. Harry's a little different, obviously, because his travels have been so highly publicized. So it's a complicated situation. And the judge has said repeatedly, and I feel a little bit bad for him because he has said this is a very, very weird case because of the notoriety of the person in question, Prince Harry, because of the media that's been attention that's been devoted to all of this, because of the fact that this is high profile. His name is being tossed around by the president of the United States. That should be indicative of something. I mean, obviously, the president of the United States has a lot of things on his mind. When he singles out one person and says, I'm going to talk about this person's immigration status and whether I'm going to throw him out of the country or not, all of this is just very, very unique. And I can understand why the judge is having a tough time with it.
So ultimately, what is next? You briefly mentioned it. What are the chances? It seems like a pretty high that the Heritage Foundation's going to appeal this, because as we were saying right at the beginning, it is a little bit of a win for the Heritage Foundation because now they know what they're appealing against. Before they didn't, because it was all blacked out. Now they know what they're appealing against with all these exemptions that they're referencing and the media harassment reason and all that BS, right? So where do we go from now in terms of the judicial process? Does it go back to Judge Carl Nichols? Is he still involved? Or is it going somewhere completely different now? I mean, where's this going?
Well, it's going to go, if it goes, which I strongly suspect that it will go to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, which is the special court of appeals that only hears cases dealing with basically the United States government. Since this is the US Capitol and the federal government is here, there's more than one, but this is the main court of appeals for the city of Washington, D.C., where the federal government is. And since the case was originally brought here in the district court, in Judge Nichols' court, it will go to the appellate court here. And a couple of things can potentially happen. They can just argue on, as we've talked about, the merits of Homeland Security's exemptions that they pointed to, and they can try and knock those out. Or they can also say, you know what, we still are not satisfied. There's too much information here that's been redacted. They can ask the appellate court to send the case back down to Judge Nichols and instruct Judge Nichols to reevaluate the redactions and conceivably open up more of the text to public view. That's one of the possibilities. Or they can just say, this wasn't fair to begin with, and we think that that Heritage has made some good arguments here, and this information should be released to the public. So it can go any number of ways. And it'll be very, very interesting to keep an eye on this and to see exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks and months.
Wow. So if they appeal, which there's a strong chance they are going, and now they know what they're appealing against, it's going to go to this next level court. Judge Carl Nichols is going to be completely out of it at that point. He exits this saga. And it goes to 3 judges, and they then decide?
Probably, it's normally a 3-judge panel at the appellate level, unless they also have what they call en banc hearings, where they all of the appellate court judges sit and I think there are usually 8 in this particular court, and they would all sit and hear this. And that's a decision that the judges at that level would make among themselves. The chief judge of the appellate court and the other judges would get together in a conference, and they would say, do we want a 3-judge panel, or do we want the en banc panel where all the judges are going to sit? And again, that'll be something that is to be determined. But it's likely that I think the en banc is very unusual. It's probably going to be 3 judges. They're chosen at random, and they would then, as I said, follow one of the courses of action that I outlined. They would either say, yeah, send this back down to Judge Nichols with some additional instructions, or we're going to just decide, yes, this was all a big mistake, and the file should actually be made public. It can go any number of ways.
So whether this goes in front of either 3 judges or let's say 8 judges, right? Either way, whatever they decide, does it have to be a unanimous decision or do they go on majority rule? Sorry, John, can you hear me, hon? Looks like there might be a little bit of internet skullduggery here. We can blame that on Megsy and the Sugars, which, by the way, I see you in the chat, Sugars. Hi, morons. Hang on a minute. Let me just message John. Just message him on here as well. Just pop here. Yeah. Okay, he just says, no, he can't hear me. He's just going to reset the Zoom and come back in. Here we go. He's coming back in.
Hey,
Hey, there you go. All right, and the show continues. We won't let the Sugars and Megsy try and ruin the technical jiggery poo back here. The show will always go on. John, can you still hear me, mate?
I can. Give me just a second.
Not a problem, honey. All right, so just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, now I can see you. I can see and hear you.
Perfect. And the
ready.
show goes on regardless of how much Megsy and the Sugars would not want it. So we were talking about, whether or not it was going to go to this 3-panel judge or 8-panel judge. I mean, it could go either way, and the decision could be numerous, right? This is the thing, though. Whether it goes to this 3-panel judge or this 8-panel judge, John, whatever decision they make, does it have to be unanimous? Or could it just be a majority rule kind of situation?
It's a majority situation.
Okay. So if, let's say, it's in front of the 3-judge panel, if 2 out of the 3 turn around and say, no, release the thing, then it's going to be released. Or if it's in front of the 8 panel, if 5 out of the 8 say release the thing, then again, the application's going to be released.
Yeah, unless, and anything is possible, unless the losing party would say, hey, we're still not satisfied. We want to appeal this to the United States Supreme Court, which is always possible. But the thing about the Supreme Court is that they can decide whether they want to hear a case or not. So they might say, let's say it's 2-1 in favor of Homeland Security, and Heritage would come back and say, all right, well, we want to appeal this to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, we're not interested in hearing it because it's not a substantial enough question in a matter of law. Then that would be the end of it.
But the chances of that going to the Supreme Court and bypassing this 3-panel or 8-panel judge, to me, sounds a little bit low, Because, like you said, Supreme Court can decide whether or not they're going to hear it. Whereas if it goes to this 3 or 8 panel judge set, they're going to hear it one way or another. It would only be maybe after that, then maybe they try the Supreme Court. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No, you would have to go through the appellate court before you went to the Supreme Court.
Okay, then. So this is a thing. Before I became a full-time YouTuber, I worked in the financial sector and I was in the complaints and compliance department, and I actually dealt with freedom of information requests. And whenever I dealt with that, based on their request, if there was something in the document that didn't pertain to the information that they required or information that they were legally party to, I would redact that information and I would release the information that was pertinent not only to their request, but what they're legitimately entitled to as well. I'm a little bit confused as to why the government's not doing that. They could redact absolutely everything they want in the world, but just leave those 2 questions and answers pretty much untouched, because ultimately the Heritage Foundation only want to know how those 2 questions were answered, right? A, have you taken any illicit substances in the past? And B, have you broken any laws of the land? That kind of thing. So why aren't they doing that? What's your theory, your thoughts on that? Because that's the thing that really confuses me the most from, my experience of working with freedom of information requests in the first place. The way they're going about this just doesn't sound right to me. What do you think?
Well, you have to remember what Heritage has said publicly that their original purpose was. Now, I put it in those terms because we could have a whole other conversation about what their private interest is. And in a nutshell, I think their private interest is to put the screws to Prince Harry and make him squirm a little bit, because they're feeling like, they clearly don't like him. They take offense at him, as a lot of people do. It's like, who is this guy? He's come from the United Kingdom to the United States. He's running his mouth about some of the things that we hold most dear, and they find that very off-putting. So that's why he's become a target, because he's said some things and done some things that have rubbed some people the wrong way. However, what they're really saying is, the argument that they're making is that they feel like there needs to be transparency. They want to know if there is government operating within the boundaries that it's supposed to operate in, or they want to know, has there been some sort of special treatment that has been given? And that's the basis of their complaint and their interest in seeing Harry's immigration file, because they either want to know, did somebody put their thumb on the scale, which is not illegal per se, or they want to know, did he actually falsify federal government documents, which would be something that would become a big issue. And Donald Trump has already said, if it's found that he's done something where he's broken the law, then we're going to do what it seems appropriate to do. And by the way, there are any number of immigration cases. There was just a case within the last 48 hours or so where someone left the United States, someone who was here on a H-1B visa, who was teaching as a university professor in Rhode Island, and left the country to go back to the Middle East and tried to return to the United States. And upon their return, the person was told, we don't care for some of the things that you've been doing and saying. You're a guest here in the United States, and so we are going to revoke your visa basically on the spot, as I understand it, which apparently they are entitled to do. And the person was put back on a plane and sent back to the Middle East, and it's become a bit of a subject of controversy. But it's within the realm of possibility that people can be deported for behaving in a way that is basically not acceptable. And when you do something that is deemed to be illegal, on top of that, then you, as I said, you really pop your head up and you make yourself a target.
Well, let's get into this a little bit more because you and I, we've been having some conversations in the background about this whole Prince Harry visa saga. And it does seem like the President Trump is playing a little bit of a long game here. Now, let's start with the whole Ashley Biden situation, because last week, you guys, I actually, did a live stream. And I asked the question as to whether the donation to Ashley Biden was somehow potentially a bribe to keep Prince Harry's visa application a secret. Now, I'm not making a statement of fact. I'm just asking a question. This is because the donation to Ashley Biden was the largest donation the Archwell Foundation had made in that year, $250,000 to a Biden. Now, this was at a time when her father was in power, during the time this fight for Harry's visa is going on and still continues now to this day. So for you, John, with you being based in DC and knowing the system and, having personal experience of all that, is it conceivable that this donation to Ashley Biden could be somehow a bribe or a payoff to keep Harry's visa application a secret? Because that donation during the time this whole Prince Harry visa application is going on, to me, it just stinks. To me, it's like something's wrong with that picture. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, well, I guess I think I would say I don't think that you're wrong to ask what's going on here. It seems, I think, to a lot of people to be a where there's smoke, there's fire type of a scenario. I think there has been, it's hard to dispute that there has been a mistake somewhere. Either Ashley Biden's charity got the money from Archwell and they did not put it on their paperwork, or the other possibility, which some people have raised, and again, this is all speculation. None of this is being, said as fact. But the other opinion about what might be going on is that Ashley Biden didn't report it because Archwell never actually sent it. Now, again, nobody knows exactly what the truth is, but somewhere in the middle of all of this is some degree of truth. And I don't mean Ashley Biden's truth, and I don't mean Archwell's truth. I mean the truth, which, is the one that people generally like to look to. So as far as the whole allegation or the opinion that this might have something to do with a pay-for-play scheme, I don't think that that's something totally unreasonable for people to ask about. There have been allegations with another of the president's children, Hunter Biden, and some of his involvement in Ukraine and I believe the Ukrainian National Gas Company, which I believe is called Gazprom. Don't hold me to that. But he was on the board of directors there. And a lot of people have said, well, what in the world does Hunter Biden know about natural gas production and fossil fuel and energy production in Eastern Europe? And a lot of people have just said that just seems very weird, and it seems like maybe there's something going on there. The same thing, I think, could be something that people raise. It seems like a very strange coincidence that just at the time that Prince Harry was very concerned about his immigration status, there's this very substantial contribution that goes to a charity run by the president's daughter. And now it's come up that there's some paperwork snafus involved here. So it just causes a lot of people to raise questions. Again, nobody has said definitively, I have not said, you have not said, Stef, definitively, okay, yes, there's some problem here, some malfeasance. None of that has been said, but it just causes people to say, well, that's interesting. Is there a smoking gun there? Is there fire? To follow up on this smoke. And I think that is going to be something that we'll start to see some more information about, since this complaint has been lodged with the Internal Revenue Service by this third party, and it could all come to Ashley Biden saying, "Oh, you know what? Sorry, oops, we messed up the paperwork. We're going to file an amended report," and that could kind of be the end of it. Or the Internal Revenue Service could say, "Hey, this is really interesting and compelling, talking about a lot of money here, and we want to dig a little deeper into this." That could also be the result.
I mean, I think the chances are potentially high that they'll dig deeper into it because this is President Trump's chance to be able to investigate a Biden and, potentially use Elon Musk, Doge, the IRS to investigate what's been going on with Ashley Biden's charity. I don't think Trump would miss the opportunity to actually investigate a Biden. What do you think? Do you think that would be high on his list, something that he would really want to do or not?
Well, I think, Trump is such an interesting animal. He can be very big picture. He can also be very pinpoint and almost to the point of being petty in some of the things. I mean, we've all seen the press conferences where he has singled people out and said, basically, individual reporters, "I don't like you. You're a pain in the neck. You ask stupid questions. Goodbye. Don't come back next week for the next press conference." That type of thing has apparently happened. I think with the Associated Press reporter that he got tangled up with. And so he can also be very knee-jerk and very sort of spontaneous in his activity, and he can also play a long game. And I would be willing to bet he does not strike me as the type of man who would forget some of the things that Prince Harry has done and said, and some of the things that his wife has done and said. But at the same time, he's probably not the type of guy that wants his fingerprints all over the situation. So would not surprise me at all if this latest complaint against Ashley Biden's charity started to get a little bit of traction, and that, government, as you said, government efficiency, or the IRS in particular, or the Department of Justice would start to take a little bit more precise look at exactly what happened here. And we'll just have to wait and see. It could
Yeah.
prove to be very, very interesting. We just don't know at this point.
Now, before we jump into a little bit more of, President Trump and whether he's playing the long game here when it comes to Prince Harry's visa situation. For those that don't know, I do have a second channel. It is called Political Nerds. That's where I talk everything politics. I do have a degree in international relations and security studies, so this is actually my academic wheelhouse. So if you want to hear me talk more politics, then head on over to my second channel and support the expansion of the Altiverse. The link to my channel for Political Nerds is pinned right at the top of the live chat if you're watching live. And if you are watching on the replay, it's linked in the description bar below. With that being said, let's segue into a little bit more of President Trump, because this specifically is what we talked about, I think like a week or so ago, in terms of if President Trump is actually playing the long game here, because, he's saying he wouldn't deport Prince Harry, but perhaps he doesn't actually need to anymore, in the sense of that if he's found to have actually lied on his visa application, and at the same time, if he's found to have committed illegal acts with actual foundation when it comes to the Ashley Biden donation, then realistically, he doesn't really need to lift a finger, because the IRS, the Department of Homeland Security, potentially Doge will join up, and they'll all investigate and prosecute him, which could then lead to deportation in of itself without President Trump having to lift a finger. Because if he did, then potentially he may risk somehow affecting his relations not only with the royal family, but the UK government as well. So it seems to me that there are a lot of pieces on this chessboard, and it's not as straightforward as people think as to, oh, well, why don't Trump deport him in the first place? No, I think there's a very what would I call it? A very complex kind of political chess game going on here. What do you think to that? think he's resetting his Zoom again. Zoom, zoom, zoom in the house. I'll just message him again. Okay. Whilst he's just doing that, you guys, and sorting out the Zoom situation, let's have a look at what you guys are saying in the live chat. Let's see. Julie Gagney says, hope Meg signed the check. That would definitely be a paper trail back to Megsy and Hazza if indeed their donation was some kind of bribe, which again, it's not a statement of fact. It is just question, opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever. Okay, it looks like we are back with John. John, can you hear me, mate? Oh, no, maybe not.
I can. And Steph, I just turned off the camera.
Okay.
I just turned off the camera hoping to grab back a little bit of bandwidth. So maybe we can just do audio.
Oh my
and see
goodness,
if that works
of course. Better. Of course, John. That's not a problem. I know that, you know, our alter nerds will be a little bit sad that they're not able to see your awesome, wonderful face and demeanor, but we will soldier on just with your voice alone. That's absolutely fine, John. So let me just repeat my question and go through it again, because it was like a week or so ago we were talking about, you know, President Trump and if he's playing the long game here, because he's saying now that he wouldn't deport Prince Harry after saying that, you know, he would if he was found to have lied on his visa application. But he's saying that he wouldn't anymore. Now, this is the thing, right? If they're found to have committed illegal acts with their charity, so if Hazza and Megsy have found having committed illegal acts with their charity when it comes to the Ashley Biden donation, then realistically he wouldn't have to lift a finger, really, because the IRS and the Department of Homeland Security will join up in a scenario where, you know, he's found to have lied on his visa application as well. DOJ may jump into the fray as well in all of this, and they could prosecute him for lying on his visa application and committing illegal acts with the charity, which could then theoretically, by my knowledge and research, lead to deportation in of itself without Trump actually having to lift a finger at all. Because if he did, then my theory is he may risk somehow affecting his relations with the royal family and the UK government. So this situation where people are like, well, why doesn't President Trump just deport him? Why don't he just kick him out and just have it done and dusted? He said he would do in the past, but he's changed his mind now. What is going on? To me, I don't think it's as simple as people think. I think there's some kind of very complex and high-level political chess game going on here, where essentially Trump is maneuvering the pieces in the background that could lead to Harry being deported without him actually having to directly do it himself. What do you think? Do you think Trump is playing this kind of long game here, or do you think it's something else entirely?
I think you're exactly right. And that's one of the working theories that some people have, is that Trump is interested in seeing Prince Harry disappear, but he does not want to, number one, he does not want to look petty. And he also does not want to have a direct hand in doing something. In other words, deporting Prince Harry. He does not want to have a direct hand in doing something that is likely to upset King Charles or potentially Prince William as well. So I think the way he's, again, this is all conjecture. I think the way the president is playing this is that he's hoping, or he may already know of something that is going to cause Prince Harry enough heartache and enough heartburn that he will self-deport. And let's keep in mind that Harry's uncle, Prince Andrew, has been said to be a person of very great interest by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, still related to some of the stuff that happened with Jeffrey E. down on the island and a few other places. But it's been said that Prince Andrew will never set foot back in the United States because he's so worried about the possibility of being prosecuted. Well, Prince Harry's already here, but if he got squeezed in a way that was similar to the way that Prince Andrew conceivably would get squeezed, I think he would pack his bags and say, I'm getting out of here because I don't want the FBI knocking on the door and saying, we have a search warrant, a court order, we want to talk to you, that kind of thing. So I think that's probably what Trump is looking for, is something to happen through some back channel where Harry figures out that it's in his best interest to get out of the United States. Now, that could be back to the UK, it could be to Canada, it could be to Portugal or Spain, wherever they're alleged to have bought a vacation house of some sort.
It was Portugal.
Any number of possibilities, but yeah, Portugal. So I think that's probably, I mean, if you ask, which you did, what my pet theory is on what's going on, I think that would be what it is, that there's stuff going on in the background that Trump has fully endorsed and that the wheels have been set in motion, but at the same time, he doesn't want to look like he's the one directly responsible.
Yeah. So ultimately, the long game, potentially, the theory goes, is either he gets prosecuted and deported, and again, Trump's not directly involved in that, so jobs are good, or this scenario causes enough issues for Prince Harry where he's pushed to leave, pushed to, as you call it,
Right.
self-deport. I don't see that happening, though. I don't see Prince Harry making that decision to self-deport because, he's got, Megxie and the children in America. Now, in the UK, for example, if there was this kind of game going on and, the government was trying to make enough noise, enough issues to force someone to self-deport, but this someone has family in the UK, they could argue that, no, you're infringing on my human rights to a family life because you're ultimately forcing me to split up with my wife and my 2 children. Could Prince Harry make that same argument in America if this is part of the long game trying to force him to self-deport? Could he fight back and say that?
Well, no, not really, because if there was pressure applied, it would be because of some alleged liability for having broken a law. So it's kind of hard to argue in the face of someone saying, you've broken the law. So then at that point, your choices are, okay, you're either gonna defend yourself or try to defend yourself and risk whatever consequences might be coming along. Or you can just say, look, I'm not into this and I don't want to run the risk. Again, kind of a Prince Andrew type of scenario where Prince Harry could say, look, I don't want to fool around with the American justice system. I don't want to have to deal with the FBI.
John, can you hear me, mate?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, mate.
I don't want to have to deal with the United States attorney. I don't want to deal with the FBI. Yeah, I don't want to deal with the FBI. I don't want to have to sit for depositions, which are a very uncomfortable part of the legal process where they can basically ask you anything and everything. They can go on fishing expeditions of all sorts. It's a very unpleasant thing to do. And he might just say, oh, I'm above all of that. And, we already know from having seen those emails that were sent to the NYPD about, oh, we demand that there be prosecutions and we demand that someone be arrested and so forth. We kind of get a sense already of the attitude that he has when it comes to law enforcement. I think he would be very reluctant to put himself in a position where he had to submit to inquiry and accusations and all sorts of things, especially from the United States federal government. That would be very, very unpleasant for him. And I can see a scenario where he would just say, "Look, I'm going to get out of here." And even see a scenario where he would say, "I'll take my chances with my kids." If Megan would say to him, "Hey, I'm not leaving California, and you left of your own accord," um, that might be something that he would be willing to do. I don't know. That'd be a very
Mm.
personal and very difficult decision for him, I would think.
All right. Well, rounding up this live and bringing it to a close, just a couple more. So, I mean, this whole process has got to be costing the government, millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, this is going all the way up, potentially, to the Supreme Court, which, then you've still got even more millions, presumably, that you've got to shell out at that point. So when we get to this next stage as to whether, the appeal faces the three set of judges or the eight set of judges, how long will that take for the either sets of judges to hear this case? Or is that a how long is a piece of string kind of question?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. It's a kind of a how long is a piece of string. It will depend on what Heritage puts in their appeal. If they ask the appellate court, "Please tell Judge Nichols to tell Homeland Security to unredact some of these documents," that could happen fairly quickly.
Okay.
If whatever Heritage decides they want to do involves a hearing or an oral argument that is more broad-based, then that could take longer. So it really is an open question. There's no easy answer. Um, the, the Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit sort of runs, I think, at kind of average speed. There are some courts there's a district court down in Alexandria, Virginia, that's known as the Rocket Docket, where they do everything extremely quickly. There are other courts that have a reputation of really dragging things out. So it will really just depend on what Heritage asks the appellate court to do, and how quickly they want to try and get to it.
Okay. And when the appellate court, again, whether it goes to the 3 or 8 sets of judges, gets this to hear, again, is this another question that's how long is a piece of string? How long does it typically take them to actually make a decision? Is it a couple of weeks? Is it a couple of months? Like, how long would it take them to make a decision? Or again, is that a how long is a piece of string question in it itself?
Yeah, it's a how long is a piece of string, because again, it's going to depend on what Heritage asks them to do. If Heritage asks them to go back and say, um, to tell Judge Nichols, "Hey, unredact some of this stuff," then that would probably be fairly straightforward. But if it's something where they want to argue on the merits and they want to say, "Hey, this stuff should not have been redacted in the first place, and we want some clarity, and we want you guys to not all guys, it could be 3 women for all I know. We want you to decide that there are some substantial legal questions here that should be answered for reasons of establishing precedents and for ensuring that there's going to be transparency, not only in this case, but in a bunch of other cases going forward," then that could be a little bit more extensive in terms of scheduling arguments, um, getting the arguments held, then filing the briefs, responding to the questions that the court asks. All of that type of stuff could it could drag out. But I will say this: I think the big takeaway from this is that Harry is not off the hook. Um, I would suspect that if he has any degree of comprehension at all, that he would be doing some soul searching and would say, "Hey, Why am I so disliked? Why does this keep coming up and nagging at me? Is there a chance that I could be very embarrassed by whatever comes out of this? I think he's got to have some of that stuff on his mind, and it has to be taking up some of his mental capacity and his emotional capacity as well.
Yeah.
So even though a lot of people will be disappointed in this redacted paperwork that came out today, I still think that there are reasons to sort of say, you know what, this is not over. And also to say, Harry's going to have to still deal with this rolling around in the back of his mind.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's the biggest takeaway of all of this. It is not over yet. There is still more moves on this chessboard to actually play when it comes to the Heritage Foundation, President Donald Trump, and everyone else that's involved, where, we want to get to the truth of the matter as to whether he lied or not on this visa application. Now, guys, if you want to hear more commentary from your favourite DC lawyer, John Witherspoon, on this matter, then please do head on over to Andrew Gold and Kinsey Schofield's channel. That was where John was just before this live stream, providing his legal commentary and his opinions on today's visa documentation release, if you can actually really call it that, on their channel. So make sure you head on over there if you want to hear more from John about this subject. In the meantime, guys, stay exactly where you are, because I am going to get you redirected automatically to my good friend, one of my big brothers, Lewis, over on Nerd Report. So stay exactly where you are, because there's more fun to be had with Lewis over on Nerd Report. And when you do get redirected, just be like, Alt a Nerd Raid. Just put Alt a Nerd Raid in the live chat so he knows that you're there and that I sent you guys. With that being said, thank you so much to John for taking time out today to come on live and, explain a little bit more about what this whole document release actually means. It is not over yet. Prince Harry has not got away with anything. Like I said, there are still moves left on this chessboard to play, and we could still have the chance to get into the truth. If you haven't done so already, do make sure on your way out you subscribe to join our Alt a Nerd tribe, because I've been covering this saga from the beginning and I'll continue to cover it right to the bitter end. Like, share, comment down below if you're watching on the replay, your opinion, conspiracy theories, whatever's. What do you think is going to happen next with this visa saga? Make sure you're also following John Witherspoon on Instagram. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning into this impromptu live stream. I appreciate all your faces. Until the next time, you guys, laters.